Okay, I see the thumbs up. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to go ahead and call this session of the City of Bonney Lake Hearing Examiner to order. For the record, today is Monday, January 29, 2024 at 10 o'clock a.m. We have one item on our agenda today, number PLN 2023-02870, a request by Elena Buzinoff for a variance to allow reduction in the width of a required panhandle lot access or else a reduction in the required side yard setback, in either case to accommodate proposed access which would be necessary to short plat the lot. My name is Alex Seidels. I'm an independent hearing examiner whom the city has selected to hold certain land use hearings like this one. It will be my role today to collect evidence in the form of exhibits and testimony to determine whether the proposal complies with the Bonney Lake Comprehensive Plan and the variance approval criteria. To that end, I received and reviewed, I think, a total of 8 exhibits, depending on how you count them, in advance of today's hearing. These include the city staff report, site plans for 3 different possible configurations of the variance, the applicant's narrative, and the public notice materials. Should anyone have additional exhibits they would like admitted into the record, please let me know when it is your turn to testify, and we can address additional exhibits at that time. Speaking of testimony, all testimony today will be given under oath or affirmation, and that is because if my decision on this variance were to be appealed, the recording of today's hearing, along with the admitted exhibits and my written decision, would serve as the foundation for any such appeal. I may ask questions of those that are testifying. I am not trying to trip anyone up. I'm just trying to ensure that I have a clear understanding of the proposal so that after the record closes, I can produce a decision that is hopefully clear and legally defensible. The order that we typically follow, and I think we'll be following today, is first we will hear from the city staff, who will provide an overview of the proposal along with any recommendations the city may have. Following that, we will hear from the applicant to see if there's any additional information they feel myself or members of the public should be aware of in advance of my decision. After that, members of the public, if any, will have an opportunity to testify, and following any public testimony, we will turn back to the city and the applicant as necessary for any response. Everyone wishing to testify will have an opportunity to do so. But just like at an in-person hearing, this will not involve question and answer sessions or objections or multiple speaking opportunities for any members of the public who may be observing or attending. So with that, I think we can get started. Who will be appearing on behalf of the city this morning?
Jason Sullivan, Interim Public Services Director.
Good morning, sir. Will you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give today will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir. And did my summary of the exhibits track with what you were hoping I would review in advance of today's hearing?
Yes, from my understanding, they do track exactly with what my understanding of the exhibits that were provided.
Okay. And do you have any additional exhibits, like a PowerPoint or anything like that, that you're going to use?
I do not.
Okay.
And if anything, I do have the ability to share screen, and I can share any specific exhibit if there's a need to pull up one of the site plans.
Perfect. And I have not seen any public comments on this anywhere in the record. Are you aware of any public comments?
We have not received any public comments that I'm aware of. When the during the initial public notice of application period or during the notice of public hearing.
Okay, very good. Sometimes that happens. All right, Mr. Sullivan. Well, why don't you go ahead with your presentation then, please?
So as I mentioned, it was going to be brief and to the point. We received a variance application to allow for a future short plat of a property here within the city. When initially working with the applicant, we noticed that in order to get the required panhandle access width onto the lot, that either the access width itself would need to be reduced or the side yard setback would need to be reduced in order to allow the panhandle access. The principal reason in the code that we have the minimum 20-foot wide panhandle access is to provide fire access. In reviewing the application with our internal fire reviewer, they believe because of the city's requirement to have sprinklers on the house and the distance from 24th to the rear of the lot, the panhandle access itself does not need to be considered a fire access way, and therefore reducing the panhandle width would be the preferred option, keeping the setbacks. And looking at reducing the setback option, you would end up having property lines, and that would require the house to be modified so that you have higher ratings on those walls adjacent to the panhandle access, which is why we felt also reducing the panhandle access width is important. I will note for the record that the requirement to have a 20-foot panhandle access width was added to the code after this property was subdivided and the house constructed. Therefore, it's our belief that the shape of the lot and the configuration of the house was not at the kind of actions of the property owner, but was a pre-existing condition and was developed under the rules in effect at the time, and that the change in condition was really a change in the city's requirement that mandated that all panhandle access lots have a 20-foot panhandle access width, which was added to the code after the lot was platted and the house was constructed. Given the housing shortage we are facing in the Puget Sound region, we believe this is a minor variance to allow for the construction of a second single home without really deviating or impacting any of their surrounding neighborhoods. So the only property that's impacted would be the future existing home on its own lot, but that would be a known condition to anybody who purchased it and lived there. So there are really no change to the neighborhood. So with that, I can answer any questions, and I apologize for the short and sweet presentation. Kind of came into this last minute, so I do apologize for that. But I have reviewed the staff report with my planning staff and can answer any specific questions if there are any. Mr. Saddle, you're on mute.
No, I got you. Yeah, it pops up a little thing. Well, thanks for the presentation, Mr. Sullivan. Don't worry that it was so short, but believe it or not, the hearing examiner does not just exist to manufacture lengthy hearings. That's a side benefit, but it's not the main thing. No, that was great. I appreciate the commentary on why we have this access width and the statement by the fire department that in this case it's just not necessary because they're close enough to the main street. What'd you say the name of the main street was? You cut out there just as you said the name.
It's 194th Avenue East.
194th.
Yeah. And unlike a lot of cities, we do require fire sprinklers on all single family homes. So this home will have a full sprinkler system, which is not a variance requirement. It's just the requirement to build a single family home in the city.
No, yeah, and it is very unusual. Frankly, more houses should probably have them, although maybe the developer community might feel differently about that, but I think it's great.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to that coin, definitely.
And a fireproof roof too as a condition of approval for this variance. Can you tell me about the public notice? I've got the dates from the staff report. I'm a little unclear. Was it published in the newspaper or how does that work?
We do not publish in the newspaper. In our review of the state law, there was nothing that mandated that we put public hearing notices in the newspaper of record. So for none of our land use permits go into the public notice of record that way. However, we do mail everybody within 300 feet of the property a public hearing notice and notice of application. It's posted on the city's website, posted at city posting locations, and then we do maintain a planning notification email list of about 300 agencies and citizens throughout the city who've requested notification of actions the planning department have taken, and we emailed them a list of that. But there is nothing that's published in the newspaper. In our review of 3670B, and I can't remember the sub number off the top of my head, that's a recommendation and not a mandatory requirement for land use hearings outside of zoning, outside of zone rezones and certain types of hearing. But other than that, it's a recommendation. So we've chosen not to continue to use newspaper, and we haven't for probably about 7 years.
Gotcha. What can you tell me about the surrounding properties? The staff report mentions their zoning. Are they all developed with single family as well?
Yeah, the whole neighborhood is already developed with single family neighborhoods. My understanding, the homes were built in the mid 90s, and the plat was about that same time or a little bit earlier. And so it's all developed with single family home. This is a larger lot, kind of a gore shaped type configuration at kind of a terminus of a kind of a curve of the road, which is why it's created this weird back end where it's developable, but it has limited access. So it's a single family neighborhood with kind of similar type structures on those types of home properties.
Gotcha. The staff report mentions in the section on critical areas that all of the city of Bonney Lake is within a aquifer and wellhead protection area, and therefore the project is subject to the requirements of Chapter 16.24 Bonney Lake Municipal Code as discussed in section C2 of this report. And then there's no further discussion of aquifers or wellhead protection. So what can you tell me about this project's compliance or non-compliance with the critical areas code?
Given that it's a single family home, it would be exempt from having to produce an aquifer recharge report. I think that was a typo. That last sentence was a typo from a previous staff report. That was a subdivision where there was a lot more discussion on the critical aquifer recharge area. But we're within a wellhead protection area. And so certain projects have to provide a hydrological report. Single family residential construction is exempt from that requirement. Let me pull up the code and I can give that to you exactly what the exemption is. Just give me 1 second. One nice thing about virtual hearings is I can pull up codes really quick.
Oh, yeah, no, it's the way to go. Yeah, this is so much better.
So the exemptions are listed in section 16 24030.
Okay.
And specifically subsection A exempts the construction of non-commercial structures. A single family residential home is a non-commercial structure. Therefore, the exemption of a single family home would not be subject to the requirements to do a hydrological assessment.
Gotcha. What if the home is larger than 2,500 square feet, or is that only for additions?
We've treated that as commercial additions of 2,500 square feet because
I gotcha.
it would be and it's a little bit of weird, but in my reading of the code, it would be weird to have all non-commercial structures and then additions of 2,500 square feet could be included. So the reading of our code is that the improvements and additions all apply to non-commercial structures.
Okay.
I agree there is some ambiguity in the code, but that's been our standard practice.
All right. Well, then why would a subdivision need one, right? Like, isn't a subdivision nothing but non-commercial structures?
Actually, in the way we've read it for subdivisions, it's not a residential. It's neither it's neither a structure nor a non-commercial structure nor a residential structure because it's the land. And then if you look down below further, there is stuff about doing infiltration. It's more about infiltration into the aquifer and the wellhead protection area. And since we're dealing with stormwater treatment bolts, for those subdivisions, which is why we've included subdivisions.
I see.
We didn't feel like it felt within that 1624.030 because it's neither commercial nor residential. It's kind of a land use pattern, and since it didn't clearly fit within that exemption, we did require subdivisions to go through that process.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to make a big thing of it, but yeah, you can see how there's two possible readings of that section A there, and the reading that you wouldn't like as much would be, if you're doing non-commercial 2,500, that's exempt. If you're doing improvements 2,500, that's exempt, and additions 2,500, that's exempt. But if you go over 2,500 on any of those things, then you're no longer exempt. I don't think that's a crazy reading, but your reading is also not crazy. And as I said, I'm not here to manufacture trouble, but it might be something to flag for the city council at code review time.
We appreciate that, and I will say it's also kind of what the intent of the provisions are for, and it really deals with infiltrating pollution generating surfaces. And so a single family home does not have a lot of pollution generating surfaces because it's mainly the rooftop.
Right.
Whereas if you're doing like large parking lots, streets, you're creating lots of pollution generating surfaces, which depending on how close you are to a wellhead, can create pollutional issues for the wellhead. So
I agree.
Understanding the intent and the code is kind of how we arrived at that kind of general practice.
No, I'm with you. Yeah. And when the code is ambiguous like this, you can kind of let common sense prevail. It's hard to imagine that, one extra single family house is going to be the thing that tips the aquifer over. All right. Well, that's enough on that subject, I think. I think my last question, one of the criteria for a variance is that the basis for the variance request is not the result of deliberate actions of the applicant or property owner. Here, the only reason they need a variance is because they intend to short plat. So why isn't that a deliberate action by the owner? What does this language mean?
My understanding has always been that the deliberate action of the owner is that they have done something which necessitates the variance. So classic example, I built a structure without a permit. I'm too close to the property line. Therefore, I need a variance to legalize my non-conforming structure. Right.
Yes.
That's how I've interpreted, not at the at the actions, right? Like the actions of the property owner that necessitate the variance. In this case, the lot configuration was done correctly when the plats were done. Back in those days, it followed all the requirements. The house was legally constructed following all the requirements. And as I mentioned in my presentation, the requirement to have a 20-foot wide panhandle access and to there was two changes in our code that came after this property was platted, which is kind of, I believe, it's what's necessitating the variance. One is our previous subdivision code allowed for access over easement. So if that provision had still applied, there would be no problem short platting this property, as they could just do an easement and there's no setbacks from easements because it's just an access agreement. Because of some issues with access easements, we removed that requirement from our code and required only allowed access over access tracks associated with panhandle lots. So the genesis or the crux of the requirement to need the panhandle access width to be reduced is because we changed our code between the time the house was constructed and the lot was platted,
Right.
to remove the you can do it by easement. So if that had still existed, which existed at the time it was originally platted, this would not be an issue. But because we changed our code for a number of reasons, it necessitated this 20-foot wide access panhandle. And as I said, primarily for fire access and to make sure that people had direct and guaranteed access. Access easements can get kind of a problem about who's on whose property. And so we feel that the reasons that we established the panhandle are addressed. It still provides sufficient access. It doesn't need to be 20 feet for fire access, and it still provides the dedicated direct access to the roadway without the easement. But what necessitated the variance was really a change in code, not an action on the property owner.
Gotcha. And do you think it makes sense, Mr. Sullivan, to make this variance, conditional on the applicant getting a short plat, like say in the next, I don't know, 3 years? Or should we just have this kind of free floating variance out there? And then if they change their mind about the short plat, they have the variance anyways? Is there anything to deal with in that department?
Well, in the way I would read our municipal code is in Title 14. We have when permits expire, and I would argue that the variance is a type of permit. So
Yep.
in 14 110, under 100, we have permit expirations, and in sub A, you have 2 years from the date of issuance if substantial progress wouldn't be made. And in my case, substantial progress would be defined as we received an application in the next two
Right.
years. And they have 5 years to kind of finish the whole plat process out. So at
Got it.
most, it would be a 5-year window. I think maybe in the variance decision, just clarifying that the variance is subject to the permit expiration requirements of 1410 100A, removes any ambiguity or doubt of whether or not the variance would expire if the plat is not acted upon.
Got it. Yep. Okay, that makes total sense. All right. Well, thank you
And
so
and I
much, Mr.
could
Sullivan. Oh, yep.
and I could say the reason that the plat was not submitted with the variance is it's costly to prepare a preliminary plat.
Yep.
And the applicant did as we requested, which was let us get to the variance hearing first, because I didn't want them to spend the money on doing all of the work to hire a survey, draw all the drawings for the variance not to be approved because it's a critical path item. So partly the reason you're not seeing both is partly at the direction of the city, but I would agree that referencing 1410 100A and the conditions of approval would just link kind of our practice and the decision together.
Yep. All right. Yeah, and I've seen it done both ways with not just short plats, but even subdivisions. You can do the variance first. You can roll it all together as one package. There's benefits to doing it either way. I agree. Something in the decision tying the two together, just so it's not this like free-floating variance out there and nobody knows why it was granted. That doesn't really make sense. All right. Very good. Thank you so much, Mr. Sullivan. I appreciate you fielding my questions. Let's go ahead and hear from the applicant team now. Who's appearing for the applicant? Hello, ma'am.
I don't know what you want me to say.
Oh, well, let's swear
You
you
said
in first.
everything
You
that
raise your
needed to
right
be
hand,
said.
please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give today will be the truth?
I do.
And can you state and spell your full name for the audio record, please?
Sure. Elena Buzunov, Elena, last name Buzunov.
Thank you so much, Ms. Buzinoff. Well, I guess, is there anything you wanted to add to Mr. Sullivan's presentation?
No, just kind of trying to figure out which option you guys would go with.
Well, do you have any preference as to which option? He was recommending, I think it's option B, the one where the only variance is for the drive aisle. Would you prefer one of the other options?
I think the one that's straight, so we don't have to have this weird loopy setback. The one that just reduces the panhandle width, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, not the side yard setbacks. That's not your preference?
Correct. I mean, it's just the easiest, straightest way to go about it, I think.
Okay.
Because if we do put a fence or something, it would be an odd shape then if it's loopy.
Okay.
And the aesthetics for, the neighbors would be kind of off.
Yeah, that's my thought too when I was looking at this. If we're reducing the setbacks, that affects the neighbors more, whereas if we don't have to touch the setbacks, then, because that's one of the variance criteria, right? That you're not hurting other people's property. All right. So Ms. Buzinoff, have you had a chance to review the staff report, which has two conditions of approval, I think. Let me call it up here. There we go. So have you had a chance to review that?
Yes.
Do you have any questions or objections about those two conditions?
No, do you need to state them for the recording?
No, I don't need that. I just want to, sometimes city staff will recommend conditions of approval and the applicant will disagree with those conditions. I'm just wondering if that's the case here.
No, I think
All
we'll
right.
work with the city.
And do you have any thoughts on the condition I was just discussing with Mr. Sullivan that I put in a reference here to section 14.10.100, which says you have 2 years to do your short plat application and then 5 years to get it approved. If you haven't done those things, then your variance goes away. Would you have any objection to a condition like that?
No, I think it's reasonable and it's in the code, and I do think a variance is a type of permit.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Well, I don't have any further questions for you, Ms. Buzinoff. Do you have any final thoughts for me?
How long will all of this take before we can proceed?
Well, I think under state law, I have 10 working days. I'm going to try to get it to you faster than that. I'm actually going on vacation on Friday, and I'll be gone till February 9. So I'm going to try to get it out to you on Thursday before I go. So we'll have to see how fast my legal editor can work. But that's my goal. If I don't get it to you before I leave, then I'll get it to you when I come back. So probably like February 12 or something like that, but I'll try to get it to you on Thursday the 1st. So that's where we'll aim for that. And I'll do it as a written decision. I'll send it out to Mr. Sullivan and his staff, and they will give it to you and any other parties of record. All right, anything further, Ms. Buzinoff?
No, that was it.
Thank you so much. Do we have any members of the public who are watching, or maybe they came into the office, Mr. Sullivan? Did anybody ever show up for this? Yep, you're the one on mute.
No, not that I have been alerted to, and in checking the room, the only people in the room are myself, you as the hearing examiner, and Mrs. Cherny.
Okay, excellent. Well, I don't have anything further for either of you. Thank you both so much for your time this morning. And Mr. Sullivan, thank you for stepping in at the last minute. You may have had not much time to prepare, but somehow you were extremely well prepared. I thought you did a great job. And Ms. Buzinoff, I appreciate you showing up and giving your support and answering my questions. All right, everybody. With that, the record is closed, and I will get started on a decision for this. Have a good rest of your day.